וגם אני פתאום רואה את הקולות.
Hello and welcome to Kolot. This is your host, Rabbi Hillel Kapenstein, director of the Columbus Community Kollel, and it's a great honor and privilege to bring to you our next episode entitled From Trauma to Triumph. We will be featuring my very own aunt, Jill Kapenstein, licensed professional clinical counselor, I believe, LPCC, if I got that right. And this is going to be a fascinating episode on trauma, on a very interesting therapy that's gained a lot of attention called SE, somatic experience. I think you guys are going to find this fascinating. And we're going to be having a follow-up to this down the road as well. So stay tuned for learning how to turn trauma to triumph. These are going to be some great episodes. And thank you for all those who've been tuning in to our past ones with, let's say it was Robert H. Schottenstein of MI Homes, or Nissim Black, or Doctors David and Miriam Portman as they discuss their journey in researching breast cancer treatment, which, you know, they're nearing the end of their trials. They could be changing the world as it pertains to treating breast cancer. So thank you for everyone who's been listening and sharing such great feedback. We always appreciate that. If you could always subscribe and leave a review and share with your friends, is always very much appreciated as well. I'd like to thank our media sponsor, Columbus Jewish News, who we partnered with a little while ago, and we're very excited to have this relationship with them as well. So without any further ado, allow me to tell you about our guest. Jill Kapenstein is a licensed professional clinical counselor who received her undergraduate degree in psychology and sociology from Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Her master's in community counseling was at Georgia State, specializing in geriatrics. During the last 5 years, Jill has completed her training in somatic experience under Gina Ross in Los Angeles. This 3-year training has provided her with the tools to help in the healing of trauma and has been successful with working in the field of addictions. Jill Kapenstein, or Jill Kapenstein, welcome to Kolot.
Thank you so much. Very nice to be here.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you if you could first, by the way, for all of our listeners, we both, Jill and I, signed full disclosures, non-disclosures, that we will not roast each other. We will not have any jokes about each other, especially the nicknames I was called as a child and sometimes still called by some people. But we're going to have a very, what we call tachlis, a very substantive conversation about SE, which is somatic experience. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, your education, and what is SE?
I'm going to start with a third question, the somatic experiencing. It's a modality. It's one modality of many that's used to heal trauma. I kind of consider it an organic method. It's a little bit more wholesome. It's using the body and integrating the body and the mind.
So, you know, that's always been somewhat discussed with controversy, the mind-body relationship, most notably, and a lot of people, swear by him, and some people really knock him. And I'm referring to Dr. John Sarno, who was very famous for mind over matter, back pain, associating herniated disc issues with emotional stress. From your experience, how do you see the mind-body relationship, and how does it come about?
It's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. First of all, if anyone comes to me with pain, we're not typically dealing with pain. We're dealing with sensations that happen in the body. If it happens to be a leftover pain that's been treated by every physician and every other modality, and they come to us and they say, you know, the doctors have all said this must have an emotional component. Can you help me? Then I'll help them with pain. Otherwise, we're looking at sensations. We're looking at things like my stomach growls, and that tells me I'm hungry. So there's a lot of sensations that are going on. There's like a symphony happening inside of our body. So if we pay attention to it, it'll talk to us. Just like, I guess one of the coolest examples I used when I was working with a particular addict, and he was telling me, he was relaying a story about someone who betrayed him. And all of a sudden, in the middle of his talk, he got this really sharp pain in his shoulder blade. And he was like, ow. And it was like, he said, I feel like I've just been stabbed in my back. And this was like related to the betrayal. So it was like a really good example of how the body will talk to us when we're dealing or talking about some kind of an emotional thing that has happened to us.
Okay, so let's get a couple things straight, and then we're going to dive in on a deeper level. Define trauma.
So there are little t traumas all the way to big T traumas.
Right.
So I'm very into continuums, and for everyone's experience, it's different. The same trauma that could have completely traumatized one person, the person next to him could be like, I missed it. Wasn't really a big deal to me, really. So everyone just experiences the world in a different way, and everyone's nervous system is wired uniquely for them. I think the most important thing when it comes to the John Sarno is a lot of people think that, oh, this means I'm psychosomatic. And that always, to me, had a negative connotation. If someone is psychosomatic, it means they made it up, that the pain doesn't really exist. And the pain is there. And we're saying the pain's there. The discomfort's there. This weird feeling is there. Let's pay attention to it. Let's track it. Let's notice it. Let's see if it gets worse. Now, if it gets worse and we continue to notice it finally resolves and discharges, amazing. If it persists and gets worse, then you need to go back to the doctor. So we're never in place of the medical doctor. We work in conjunction with the doctor.
Okay, so, you mentioned before someone having that, growling sensation. So on one hand, we believe that Hashem created our bodies with signals that are good for us. If something hurts, that means maybe pay attention. That's why when you don't, part of the, going back to the pandemic, when people were asymptomatic and spreading it before they were, the vaccines and everything, it was very hard because the normal gift that Hashem gives us of having symptoms did not exist. But generally speaking, we do get to we are privileged, as uncomfortable as it may be, to have pains and to have these things. So how do you know when it's just I'm hungry versus something else going on?
It's a very different feeling. It's kind of like when someone has a baby and you say, how am I going to know the different cries? You learn. You know the different cry for someone who's in pain versus someone who's just uncomfortable, someone who's really tired. So basically, I believe that all human beings are born with the same language. All human beings in every country and every part of the world are born with this language of sensations, of feeling. So we try to teach these children how to talk so that we can understand what's going on in their brain. But it's more important for us to follow our gut and learn to pay attention and listen to what's going on in our body. So a growl in the stomach is very different, at least in our day where there's, thank God, plenty of food around. There's not enough emotional support going around the world right now, but there's plenty of food. So we don't know, thank God, that severe hunger pain. But typically, if our stomach is growling, that's a good sign. That means we're not overeating and we're listening to our body, and now it's time to eat. So as far as another discomfort, I'll tell you, there was a man that gave me a story. I don't know if you have time for a 60-second story.
Of course.
So he came to our house. He was collecting for a yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, and we needed a suitcase delivered to Eretz Yisrael for my son who was going skiing. And I had no idea how he was going to get the suitcase there. But this man called and I was like, oh, this guy is the nicest guy in the world. He came over and I said, oh my gosh, you got so thin. What happened? He said, let me tell you a story. So he starts telling me that he was at a shul and he was collecting in New York, and he got this sensation that went from his elbow down to his wrist. And he said it was the strangest sensation he'd ever felt. It was not painful. It wasn't at all anything really discomforting, but he knew it was very odd. It was a strange sensation. So he happened to mention something to the person who brought him to the minyan. And it happens to be that this very famous cardiologist was right behind him. When he finished davening, he took his pulse. He realized he was in the midst of having a massive heart attack. And thank God they got him to the hospital immediately in time before he died. And this was like 2 years later. And he was telling me the story. And as he was telling me the story, he was shaking his legs like as if he were running the entire time he was telling me the story. And when he told me the story, it took him a solid hour to tell me every detail of the story. But I can tell you, just by listening, he was doing somatic experiencing. His body was reliving the whole drama of the event. And his body was then discharging through the running in his legs, because when they strapped him to the table to do the surgery and everything, he had really wanted to leave, because obviously, none of us want to have surgery, but if we have to, it saves our life, right? So this was amazing. It was a dramatic instance of this man listened to the sensation. He knew it was odd. He was in touch with himself, and it saved him. A lot of us feel sensations all day long. And I'm not saying we have to pay attention to every sensation that happens, but if it's a really strange sensation, I think we need to make sure that we're really integrated and we keep our head and our body, really closely connected, and listen to those.
Wow, that's quite some story. Let me ask you about the sensation that some folks feel in their right pocket on Shabbos when their cell phone's not in their pocket, but they feel
the phantom buzz.
Yeah, so what's that all about?
Right, so that's basically the brain. Great question. I love this question. I love using somatic experiencing with cognitive behavioral therapy, because our brain is wired in such a way that we're expecting, like we're used to getting that buzz, and we're like, oh, that brings me connection. And all of us are looking for connection, and whether it's screen time connection or personal connection face to face, we're looking for connection. So that connection is made between your head and your body, that you're expecting this buzz that happens all week long. And then when it doesn't happen, your brain can kind of be like, where is that? So that's a really exaggerated form. I think it happens to more your generation than mine. Because
But the reason why I think it's so telling is because now that I think, I've had that once or twice before. I hope that's okay if I say publicly. But and I realized later, thinking back, that I was bored at the time. Like whatever was in front of me was not interesting. Now that I think about it, is that because there's a void and sometimes our body needs to fill the void with sensations? Is that what's going on?
I mean, it could be. It just really depends on your brain, the neural pathways in your brain. If they've created this, I got bored. When I get bored, I'm looking to connect with someone on my phone. I'm looking for an escape. Most people are numbing out today. So there's a continuum of people being numb and frozen versus all the way over to the other extreme of I feel everything. I feel all of these sensations. They make me nervous. I don't know what to do. So if the pathway is connected to those feelings inside their gut or their belly or their chest pounding, if those feelings are connected to neural pathways in the brain of I need to run, I'm uncomfortable, whatever, they'll jump over to the other side. And that's what happens with addictions. They just want to turn all those sensations off and numb them out and quiet them because I just want to feel calm.
Okay, so you mentioned addiction. Let's go to that for a second. So, I mean, where's my coffee? Oh, whoops, I threw it out already. I'm addicted to coffee. I full disclosure, right? Okay, now the insides are coming out. Yeah, I've had sensations in my phone from lack of phone, and I'm addicted to coffee. Yeah, those are the two things I'll share with everyone.
Okay, but Hillel, when you say, Rabbi Kapenstein,
Hillel's fine.
Thank you. I'm addicted to coffee. Are you feeling any sensation in your body now as you say that?
So absolutely not. But if I go a day without coffee, I feel it upstairs. So
so you feel a little bit foggy
or headache. Yeah.
What's that? Okay. Well, I mean, that is your brain needing the caffeine. Mm-hmm. But just the idea for some people of, oh my gosh, I might have to go a day, like maybe it's Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av, and I have to go a day without my coffee. They might start to get like a little strange sensation in their solar plex. They're, somewhere in between, maybe even their heart would pounding, like I'm getting anxious even thinking about it. But it doesn't sound like you're connected with that.
Okay, but you mentioned the heart beating and you also mentioned CBT. Now I want to connect CBT and SC if there's some sort of connection, because a lot of research has indicated that to the contrary, like if someone's starting to feel those sensations, exposing them to those triggers, this is most common in OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, exposing them, someone who has this obsession with cleanliness and hand washing, Yep. Put your hands in mud, let that sensation go and get comfortable with it, right? Exposing. How does that, is that at all related to somatic experience? Because here you're actually trying to increase the experience and then not let it bother you.
Right. So exposure therapy has been proven for many years to work. You do a little tiny bit at a time. So what I think, and what I think is generally accepted, is that people develop OCD and those kind of coping mechanisms as a way of dealing with anxiety. So if someone has a lot of anxiety, they're going to try to create order in their life, right? I'm worried about this, so I'm going to set this up in advance. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And if I do this, and this behavior, then maybe that won't happen, right? So that's where the compulsive disorders come in, is they're trying to deal with the anxiety. In somatic experiencing, we say, let's just deal with the anxiety. What's bothering you? And where do you feel it? And let's go to that place and then see what happens. See, we're not staying in the body or staying in the mind. We're having this pendulation between the mind and the body. Some people start in the brain and they come to me and they tell all kinds of stories for hours. And I'm like, I just try to slow them down and say, okay, now as you say that, because oftentimes it's very traumatic things they're telling me. As you say that, do you notice anything that you're feeling in your body? And if they do, then we deal with that. And then we go back up to the brain. We just keep pendulating back and forth from the brain to the body so that we're creating this integration. Does that make sense? We're not staying in the body and we're not staying in the brain. What causes anxiety is when we're in our brain and we're going round and round and round, and we like need to ground the brain and say, pause button. Let me go into Gina Ross. You mentioned she was the person who trained me. So she calls our body the washing machine. So she said, we did push the pause button on the washing machine on the brain and use your body, go in your body and clean some of those thoughts. Take one thought at a time. I'm scared about this. Okay, go in your body, see if you notice anything, pay attention to it, and let your body wash it out. Does that make sense?
Okay, but that's kind of the opposite approach, isn't it? Like Essie is saying, focus on the body to try to see if you could, flush it out, wash it out, like, the washing machine reference. CBT, exposing, is kind of the opposite. Let's ignore it, but keep pounding it in, right? I mean, don't they seem sort of, at odds?
So I'm not a specialist in CBT. I try to use it, and I've watched it be used in the addiction world. And without somatic experiencing, I watched the men that I work with relapse over and over and over. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of like their method. It's this change, these developmental stages of change. And the last one is repeat, so it's almost like teaching them, like, no matter what, you can never heal. You're just going to go to that last stage and you're most likely going to relapse. Craziness. Essie says, no. Of course, we have to change the neurons. We have to change what you're thinking. But what we want to teach you is how to feel safe in your body and how to trust your body. So when these sensations come in, instead of having to numb them and thinking, oh my gosh, I have to find my dealer right away and get this drug, instead it's like, oh, wait a minute. I have to listen to my body. It's telling me something, but I think it's nervous. Let me deal with what's bothering me. Let me go in and try to feel safe. And honestly, when I work with the addiction population, it's so successful time and time again. The first year I worked in my addiction treatment center, my director was very big into CBT. Only CBT, don't use any of that body, what stuff with my guys. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then Corona hit and all bets were off. I was like, I got to use everything in my,
tool.
Every tool I have. And I started using it, and like miraculously, like it sounds so hokey, but these guys took to it so quickly because they are on that opposite end of the spectrum where they are feeling everything and they need to numb. So they're constantly going back and forth from one extreme to the other. And what somatic experiencing does is it teaches them how to live in the balance. It teaches them how to live in the middle of that continuum of being integrated. And when their brain is saying one thing or their body is saying one thing, I know I have this tool and I can balance myself. I can learn to pendulate back and forth. I can learn to accept this feeling. I had a young man, he was like 20, 21 years old. He was going for walks during Corona. At the treatment center, they would let them go out and go for walks. And he kept climbing trees and he was scraping up his hands and he was screaming and he was yelling, and he was really disturbing the other patients in the rehab center. So of course they called me and they're like, could you please have a session with him, like in one session? But honestly, in 3 sessions, I taught him how to feel safe in his body. He said he had never, since he was a little child, never felt safe. He never knew. He was constantly in and out of the emergency room for different things. He was sure he was having a heart attack. He was sure his stomach was like, he was sure his entire body was broken. And after a few sessions, I taught him this and he was like, wow, you mean I can trust my body? I never knew I could trust my body. So when someone learns how to feel safe in their body and trust their body, it's not, I was listening because I knew you were going to ask me the history of somatic experiencing. So I listened to a couple of YouTubes of Peter Levine, which anyone is free to do. He started this in the 1970s with a particular patient that was very, very anxious, and he could see that a lot of things were shut down in her pupils and everything was over it. And he did a certain thing that just like came to him, and it was by accident, and it worked. So, the healing process from what he found is built in each and every one of us. We were created with this healing mechanism inside of us. And he used the example of when someone gets a broken bone. So, okay, so it's fractured and you have to go to the doctor. And what the doctor does is he puts a cast on your arm, and 6 weeks later, it wasn't the doctor who made the bone grow back together. It was the cast. So the doctor facilitated the healing process by putting on the cast on the arm. And funny enough, but they showed that the cells actually healed, and the arm is now stronger than it was before it was broken. Right? So it's really incredible that we have this healing mechanism, not just physically, but we also have this mechanism inside of us to heal emotionally. So it's really beautiful. We have it. So as a therapist, I don't consider myself a magician. I'm not an amazing therapist. I'm using a modality that facilitates a healing process, but the healing happens automatically within the person when they allow it to happen. So if they're super motivated, like an addict who's burned down their life in literally minutes, they are really desperate. They really want to heal, and they listen to me and they do it, and it's amazing. If a person comes in and their trauma's not as big, and it's like, listen, my son's wetting his bed, or this is happening. We do it slowly. It can usually happen in a couple of sessions, and I can show them how to do it, and we're good to go.
Okay, so I'm jotting down a few things that I want to make sure I cover. The first thing is, let's go in stages, because you just mentioned the addict, which is like, someone who's hitting basically rock bottom. So let's build our way up. Let's start with someone who's having a hard time dieting. I don't know, let's say me, but let's say anyone who's having a hard time dieting, and you just finished Pesach, and now you got Shavuos, and then you get Rosh Hashanah. It's like there's no such thing as I'll start by the next Yom Tov, right? So you got to start today. We all know that. Not tomorrow. Not Sunday morning. Oh no, Sunday's like, bagel day. So Monday morning, right? It doesn't work that way. So so what happens is, and I've gone through this myself, where like, you put on a really good day of healthy eating, and you're like, yeah, I should have lost like 15 pounds today. That was a really good day. Like, the carbs were limited, the proteins were high, the fats were, what they should be, and the fruits and vegetables and exercise, right? And like, you feel like, 2 days later, yeah, I should be 20 pounds by now. The third day, you start getting those, what's in the cabinet, what's on the top shelf, where's this, where that, and you start to feel like real, it's legit, like craving, sensations. So with your experience, what would your recommendation to be? We're starting like low level, like this is probably something that a lot of people have, probably everyone at one point or time in their life. So what would the SE, mindset approach be in, I guess we'll say level 1 in this case?
If I had figured this out, believe me, I'd be 10 pounds less for sure. The Chagim are hard. I'm suffering right along with you. And you don't have my genetics, obviously. But I think in this case, this is where CBT and SE work the best, in conjunction with each other. We have to say, yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. We go in and out of these Chagim, and we try really hard. But we have to change the neural pathways in our brain to, I can do this. No matter what comes along, I can do this. I can trust my body to tell me when I'm hungry. And if I'm not hungry, I need to do something else that'll make me feel calm. Because the opposite of feeling anxious or upset or whatever we're feeling that gets us activated and gets our body going, the opposite of just knowing what our goal is. Our goal, we want to lose 10 pounds, right? Our goal is we want to feel calm. We want to be thinking calm. We want to know other resources that make us feel calm besides the food, so that we're not looking for the cabinet. We're looking for that other, it might be a squishy ball. It might be exercising. It might be, listening to music that we enjoy. But having a list of resources that we know will keep us calm instead of reaching for that thing that we think is going to ground us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Yeah, like substituting it with something more substantial sounds like. Okay. Now let's go
healthier.
Healthier. Let's go to level 2, because I remember I was once listening to a talk, a parenting talk about how parents who have, children who, with ADHD and we're talking about, real cases, not like, the cop-out cases, real cases, and how parents are so reticent when they shouldn't be, when it's inappropriate, about medication. And I remember this was Dr. Lieberman would say, so how much soda does your kid drink? And how much candy, right? And they would tell him, it's like, so do you know, by the way, the amount of sugar and the amount of caffeine that they're taking in is probably a lot more, stimulating than whatever this drug is. So you're ready. Number one, your kids are already on drugs. And number two, what this could, by eliminating that, you might not even need it. And number three, even if you do, this will help them be more successful. So my point is that addiction could really run a very, very wide spectrum. You have like people that say that I'm addicted to sugar, and then you have addicted to caffeine, then they're addicted to some sort of stimulant outside caffeine, whether that's whatever type of stimulant that is. Then you have the more intense stuff. So let's go from sugar to caffeine for right now. Someone who's addicted to coffee or soda or whatever it is, and they don't have that. Let's say they need, for whatever reason, they need to get off caffeine. They need to. Their body cannot take it for whatever reason it is. And then they wake up that morning, they got that stuff going on. It's not fake. It's real. So in that case, what would the recommendation from someone with SE experience be?
Well, you happen to pick an example that I had to go through. I was addicted to caffeine, and I was getting headaches that were building and building. And friends of ours, the husband is a physician. He wrote a book on chronic pain, and he has a whole chapter in there on headaches and how it's so important that if you get headaches, that it's probably from the caffeine. And we all have this misnomer of like, if we take Excedrin or something with caffeine in it, it'll make the headache go away. Well, for sure it will, because you're just feeding the addiction. Right? But if you want to get rid of the headaches altogether and not get rebound headaches and just keep chasing this spiral, then you have to some people, caffeine is amazing for them. They love it. They live on it. It's just, they think better on it. It's great. Other people get chronic headaches and it's really poison for them. So you have to know yourself. And for me, I was able to use somatic experiencing on myself, just saying, like, I have to remind myself all the day, I love the way it tastes. I love the way it smells. And every once in a while I slip up and I'll have like half a cup and I'll suffer the next day because I'll get a headache. And I'm like, okay, that was silly. But I don't beat myself up. I practice self-compassion, which is a big part of learning new cognitions, is I don't have to be critical. I can be curious. And one of the things that I work with all my clients who tend to be self-deprecating, if they're very critical, to say, well, let's give that C a break. Let's go to curious. Oh, I had that cup of coffee. I only had a half a cup. Like, I must have been really stressed. You know what? Tomorrow, I know I'm going to get off of this. I know I'm going to be kinder to myself, and I'm not going to do that again. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to do, is just shift over that mindset of being curious and not critical.
Okay, and let's go to level 3, opioids, or some of the more intense.
That was a big switch to 3.
Right, levels 2 to 3 is where the fun starts. There, a person, from my very limited understanding, their body will actually like contract. There will be like real, relapse is serious stuff, and you can't, one who's unfortunately in that situation can't stop cold turkey. whatever the drug or the name is. I won't try to pronounce any of them because they're above my pay grade. Not saying much, but they're very hard, these long names, and whatever, they're generics and whatever they are. But when that level has been reached, you can't just say, oh, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, you can't just say, oh, just, do the regular therapy. There you have some real physiological consequences. So how do you blend that when someone needs to go through that treatment?
Right. So the men that I work with have gone through detox in a hospital. They've had to be monitored medically and kept safe from, being driven to like desperation of wanting to deal with the suffering that they're going through. So they usually detox for 5 to 7 days, or 3, 5, 7, depending on how much they've been on. And then they come to us. They still have, it takes them a good another week or so before they're not really experiencing major cravings. And then some will experience cravings for months. So it really just depends on the person. But what they do is, as soon as I would say that 90% of the people that come in, I'm not talking about the 70-year-olds who've been alcoholics for 50 years. I'm talking about like these opioids, these medications where they're, a lot of the men that I've worked with have been narconned, meaning, they've literally passed on to the other side several times and been brought back to life. So they're really destroying their bodies. So when you think about that, they're trying to kill themselves, actively, and they know what they're doing, but they're so desperate to stop those sensations that are occurring that they're willing to kill themselves. Now, that type of person, the trauma field is usually their body. So typically their trauma has happened to them in their body. Many of these people have been molested. Many of these people have been violated on some major level. So because of that, they feel like their body is already damaged and not worthy of saving. So that's why they're willing to pummel themselves to death to begin with. So once you deal with the trauma, and there's Dr. Gabor Mate is a doctor in Seattle. He's originally from Hungary. I think as a 1-year-old was in the Holocaust. He says that all addiction is from trauma and that you have to heal the trauma. And I would agree with him that, if you don't deal with the trauma, you're never going to get rid of the addiction. So Bill, who wrote the big book, it was a really good start and it's used a lot. We have to do the underlying trauma, just like with OCD. If you don't attack and heal the anxiety, it's going to be real hard to put away those coping mechanisms. Like,
right. A few months ago, or a few weeks ago, we did a gig, which I told you about, with Ohio State coach Ryan Day. And he talked about what he tells his teammates, his players on his team. You guys, just remember, your physical health and mental health are very much alike. If you got something, if you sprain your ankle, you do something, it's minor, you could do it, you could take care of it relatively easily. If you don't take care of it, it gets worse and worse and worse. And eventually you might need to do some, serious, recovery, exercises to eventually get back. And who knows what it'll be like that. And same thing with our mental health. Childhood. Okay. This is probably.
Wait, I don't want you to leave that thought. When we sprain our ankle, we can't do the game. We're going to be sad.
Right.
Now, we don't have to become depressed, but our mental and physical health are interlinked. You can't separate them. If someone gets a boo-boo, they're going to be upset.
Yeah.
That's just the way. And if someone's sad, it's also going to hurt. I mean, the same Dr. Gabor Mate is saying like all disease is from this hurt that we don't deal with. And he's treating people with stage 4 cancer and healing them, because he goes in using psychedelics and all kinds of different things, and he heals the trauma, and he's having these incredible recoveries because he's healing the trauma. So I don't believe that you could separate the two. You have to fix both, and know that when I tell the guys I work with that they have a healing mechanism inside their body, they're like, you mean my body's actually good for something? Like, look at that. Like we can learn to enjoy our body. We can learn to listen to it and have our brain and our body work together.
Absolutely. And we're actually going to be doing an episode, as I mentioned earlier, on abuse, molestation, how that has the short term and very, very consequential long term effects on people, and we're going to cover that. It's so telling. I want to go to our final, somewhat final topic, and that is childhood. A lot of the trauma that we have was quote unquote baked into the cake a very long time ago. A few months ago, we had Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson on, and we need to do a take two, because I had a list of 10 questions for him, and about an hour and 20 minutes in, I realized, oh my gosh, I only got through 5 of them. So, we're gonna bring him back on, a great friend and mentor, and a Rebbe, I guess I should say also. But he said something that I forever will be quoting and repeating, and that is, when he sees people fighting, and whether it's rabbis, unfortunately, leaders, or politicians, or whoever it is, he feels like he wants to just tell them, it's not you, it's your traumas that are fighting. There's something that's triggering. So, and we all get into some sort of, conflicts. That's part of life. And our traumas are probably playing somewhat of a role in that. So for the simple folks, we're not, we're not talking about the people on opioids or caffeine addicts, or that could be everyone too. But the people that had something in their childhood and their traumas are coming up, what is the simple things? Of course, this is not a therapy session for people just listen to. Oh, let me go do this. But what are the things that they should start getting familiar with, so they could be more in touch and live more, free and peaceful lives?
Right. I guess to know first and foremost that we're going for calm, we're going for clarity. And there's a lot of confusion out there. Here we are living in a country, I'm not getting political, but it's very difficult sometimes to get baby formula. Okay. People, we can't get baby formula for our young children, right? But there's absolutely no stopping all the opioids that are constantly, the fentanyl that's laced with who knows what, the Adderall that's it's coming into our country, no problem, no supply chain issue there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we're living in times where it's a little nutty. So we have to know that our job is to check in with our body. Like, how's our brain? A good thing for everyone to know is, when your head hits the pillow, do you go out instantly, or is your mind racing? Is it what do I need to do? What's carpool? What's lunches? What's dinner? What's this, laundry, that, who knows? Right. So we need to be able to stop those racing thoughts and say, okay, I'm going to notice my body, lying here in the bed. Am I comfortable? I work with people a lot. They can just be stressed, and you could just look at them and know where they're holding their stress. They could be like this, or they could be feeling stuck and their foot's sitting like this. Your body will constantly be talking to you. And I think the average person, all of us need to just slow down and notice, is there a part of my body that's tense? If it is, let me pay attention to it. Let me just see what happens. There's all kind of breathing exercises that we do. There's all kind of integration things that we do in order to keep our brain and our body, working and integrated.
Wow. In short, seems like there's this common theme. Just be in touch with oneself, seek there's the phrase when it comes to relationships, Ohev Shalom Varodi Shalom, seek peace, pursue peace. So I think the relationship with oneself, they have to seek MS, they have to seek the truth. And the truth, if it's, one's being intellectually honest, I think will play a big role in them finding whatever it is that will be the solution for them. But it sounds like my takeaway from this is that SE is a major tool in the toolbox, and there are different therapies that work for different people. And what I think, what I'm gathering is from Dr. Peter, what's his name again?
Dr. Peter Levine, yeah.
Dr. Peter Levine. What he, I think, brought is a therapy that could be very effective for people and that have not been able to find success in other therapies. And we're adding a very important therapy to the toolbox. And for some it will work, for others it won't. Just like in medicine, there are certain people that will respond to certain antibiotics or other medications differently. And this is one of those important therapies in the toolbox. I'm not sure if you agree with my summing this up. That's kind of how I see it. How would you say you see it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there are people that are so frozen that they can't let me in their body. So it could take a year before I could do SE with them. Mm-hmm. I'll keep trying. But if they don't let me in and they're like, I don't feel anything. Okay, well, wait, depending on the urgency of the situation that someone's in. But I'll tell you, that's the main thing, is if we're not connected to ourselves, we can't effectively and in a healthy way connect with other people.
Mm-hmm.
So you see these people that are like over and over and over going for like the unhealthy relationships, or they're creating turmoil all over the place. And they'll come to me and they'll be like, my boss, I'm having this problem. I'm having this problem. It's the same problem. They're not connecting effectively because they're not integrated with themselves. So if we can show them this and we can get them balancing out in themselves pretty quickly with what are my thought processes, and where is that happening? Do I feel uncomfortable? How can I feel safe? How can I trust my body? How can I rewire my brain so I can do this? You know, I teach anxious children how to swim. So I usually get kids, and they've taught me so much when I work with them. You know, they're sure their parents have told them for 7 straight years, if you go near the pool, you're going to drown, right? And then they bring them to me and say, teach them how to swim. So I have all of these cognitions that are like, I can't do this. If I even go near this pool, I'm going to drown. So I have to convince them, no, your mom is sitting over there. I'm not going to let you drown. You're going to learn how to swim, but you're not going to just learn how to swim, but you're going to love it. You're going to enjoy it. And the water is gentle. And I'm sorry they told you were going to drown. You're going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's changing all of those neural pathways, reinforcing you're okay and you're safe. But I've watched these little kids one after the other, and I tell them, I say, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And they do. And then they swim. So I'm showing them at the same time, we're changing these neural pathways. I'm safe. And look at me. Look what I'm doing. I'm swimming. And it's beautiful. Literally in 2 sessions, I have these kids swimming, and it's really beautiful.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
all ages and stages, it sounds like it could be
Yes.
very helpful.
It can work. It can work with anyone. The person just has to be willing. They have to be willing to swallow the antibiotic for it to work, typically.
Correct.
You know,
Getting the prescription, dropping off the pharmacy is only
it's a big process.
Right. People need to want to get help and then actually get help. Absolutely.
Right. And I think they need to know that they can heal, that healing is possible.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, this was fascinating stuff. When I first heard of SC, as you may remember, I was like, what is this? But it's interesting because you learn how, I don't want to say how complicated, because that has a negative connotation, but how sophisticated human beings are. And it's so fascinating, and how this could play a role and be, I'm sure, for many, life-changing and life-saving. So this is a fascinating episode. This really does conclude our Parshas trauma. Maybe we'll say first take. We're hopefully going to have more on this topic. And Jill, this was awesome. Thank you. I hope we do this again.
Thank you for bringing this attention to the world. Whoever hears this, I hope it will help them.
Amazing. Awesome. Thank you so much. And we want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. It's exciting, the numbers that we're seeing. My algorithm is telling me we have listeners in over 6 countries around the world and dozens of states in the United States. And thank God we're bringing Kolot, the many voices that we need to have in our life, teaching us new things, more things, and how we could help ourselves and others live a better life, connect to Hashem, live a life of Torah, mitzvahs. And part of that is to be healthy. Part of that's to be safe. I'll end with this. Some people say in the name of Rav Tzadok, some people say in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, but depression is not an Aveira. It's not considered one of the 613 thou shall or shall not do. Or neither is to be happy. If you were to look in the count of whether it's the Sefer HaChinuch who counts the Taryag mitzvahs, it's not mentioned there. The mitzvah to be b'simcha, or the mitzvah to not be be'atzvus, in depression, but Simcha will allow a person to fulfill 613 mitzvos the most and the best possible way, and depression will hold them back from fulfilling the mitzvos, in a very significant way as well. So this is very important, and we want to thank you again for joining us and sharing your background, your experience with our listeners.
Thank you.
To listen to all Kolot episodes and see upcoming guests, visit kolotpodcast.com. We are also on all podcast players. Type in Kolot on iTunes, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Podbean, and Amazon. Share with your friends, and please make sure to give us a 5-star review. Kolot is a project of the Columbus Community Kollel, a full-time Jewish learning center in Bexley, staffed with high-caliber Torah scholars. Ever since 1995, boys, girls, men, and women from all backgrounds and affiliations have found many opportunities to connect with Torah and mitzvos at the Kollel. Whether it's a study partner, an engaging lesson, or a program, the Kollel is your one-stop shop for all your Jewish learning. If you want to know how you can benefit from the Kollel, visit thekollel.org. That is TheKollel.org, and forever be inspired.